Today we have an annual event where we're going to hear from two individuals who have been in our industry fellowships, and I want to just speak about the industry fellowships for a moment. These are programs that have existed going back to 2012 when Ann Young and Biogen agreed to create an academic industry fellowship program. And the notion was to expose academic physicians to the nuts and bolts of drug development. That program worked very well for a long time. And what we found over time was that a fraction of people who did the Biogen program ended up going into industry, and some people brought their hands about that, and some people said, well, that's great because that gives us a foot into conversations with Biogen, and I think it's generally worked well from both points of view. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've expanded these programs to incorporate other companies, amongst them Pfizer, Takeda, and Praxis, which is a biotech company. And those programs have gone along reasonably well. In the last year or two, industry, biotech in particular, but pharma in general, has had some financial challenges. And so some of these programs are on life support, and some of them are continuing. And we continue to recruit individuals for Pfizer and for Takeda. Biogen is reworking their system, and Praxis is also a possibility, but not currently active. But I do think the value of these programs is that they really do teach people how drugs are developed and how to come at them, either from the industry point of view or from the academic point of view. The other thing I would just say about these programs is we've had some headwinds from the hospitals around the notion that someone who is a fellow could also be an industry fellow. And the hospital CME people have determined in their infinite wisdom that they're not going to allow that anymore. So we have to figure out mechanisms for people to do the two parts of the role, the academic part and the industry part, without being in a formal fellowship. And we have some mechanisms for that. And over time, we've had people at the assistant professor and occasionally even the associate professor level spend time doing one of these industry fellowships. We call it fellowship, but that's really an honorific. It's not a training designation. And if anyone has any questions or interest in these programs, please reach out to me. I would love to speak to you and tell you about them, the pros, cons, the obstacles, and the advantages. So I hope you'll reach out if you have any interest in this. You can really be anywhere in the career path and still participate in one of these programs. With that, we're going to start. We have two speakers today. We have Nara Michaelson, who's been at Biogen for the last year and a half, and we have Roman Lunis, who's been at Takeda for almost 2 years. And they're going to talk about their experiences at these two companies. Each person's going to speak for about 25 minutes, and then we'll have 5 or 10 minutes of questions, sort of in a panel format, if you'd like to ask questions. So with that, I'm going to introduce Nara, who's going to speak about aligning the ivory tower with biotech power, a new paradigm for partnership between academia and industry. Nara, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cole. So it's an honor to be with all of you here today, giving grand rounds, and I think it's a very timely topic as well. So I hope you enjoy what we have to discuss. This is a slide, no CME credit, but I promise this will be a lot of fun and hopefully very educational in its own way. Disclosure summary as well, and learning objectives. So I want to talk about some of the fundamental differences that do exist between research priorities, project structures, timelines, funding mechanisms between academia and industry. So how do they differ? But more importantly, I want to really inspire you to think about how can they align and support research, really important research that impacts so many patients that is really critical to continue. So we're going to talk about ways that even for those of us staying in academia to engage with biotech, and there's so many opportunities to get involved. And so I want to start here. So Probably everyone has had a wide range of experiences so far within industry. Maybe some of you have had very little. I had very little throughout my medical school and residency training, and wasn't until I had this really amazing opportunity with the Anne Young Translational Medicine Fellowship that I got to learn, as Dr. Cole said, what is industry about and how can we work together. So I think this is really important. So I'm also currently a fellow in the Multiple Sclerosis and Neuroimmunology Fellowship, and my personal history with MS started with when one of my friends was diagnosed with MS when I was an undergrad at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and that was really an important reminder of how people can go one day being a very normal kind of college student, focusing on their lives and their future, and then suddenly develop a lifelong, sometimes unpredictable neurologic condition like multiple sclerosis. And it was just really amazing to watch him through treatment and through his physicians overcome and continue to be successful in his career. And that really inspired me to learn more about MS. And of course, in multiple sclerosis, we'll see it's been a field of neurology that's really benefited from partnering with industry. And I think it really has a lot of great lessons for us that we can all learn. So I want to kind of just give a brief reflection again on the importance of what industry does when it's able to collaborate with patients and with physicians. So, how did it start? Let's take multiple sclerosis as an example. It really wasn't that long ago. We often take for granted that it wasn't that long ago that MS was considered like pretty much untreatable. So I think this is a really interesting example. This is a textbook from 1952, not 1852, 1952, and back then it went by the name disseminated sclerosis. And in this textbook, they mention that under treatment, what they say is basically just it's better that you should just gather your financial resources against the days of disablement that lie ahead, and basically that there was nothing available. And thankfully that did not end up being the case. We actually have over 20 FDA-approved treatments, which are very effective, and so many of our patients today are doing very well, at least in terms of preventing relapses. And this slide is also really impressive, all the steady advances that have been made. And this is 2023, and we're still having so many drugs that are going to be coming out in the near future. So I think that let's start there, and as a reminder of we can really perform modern day miracles, such as treatment of multiple sclerosis, for example. And then this is also just to give you a sense of these drugs are very complex. They act on so many different aspects of the immune system, and it's been really fascinating as I've been working with people at Biogen to think about on a very complex level, how are these drugs made and all the challenges that go into safety monitoring and manufacturing and just the actual logistics of getting these drugs made and distributed and approved. So that is also something that's been really fascinating to learn more about. So I want to talk the next part of the talk, I want to talk about how are these medical breakthroughs achieved. And I thought I really wanted to challenge people like joining the talk today to think creatively about how we can work together, because a lot of people come into this with maybe some preconceived notions about what industry is and how academia and industry should be related. But so I came up with this reworking of this allegory that I thought could be a creative way to express how I've come to view academia and industry. So, I call it reworking this allegory of Beauty and the Beast. So, just to quickly remind everyone, so Beauty is, or Belle is this like kind-hearted, intelligent, like very studious young woman. She has this aging inventor father, and then one day he gets lost in the forest. He stumbles upon this mysterious enchanted castle, and then he falls into trouble, and he takes a rose from the castle's garden, and that's where we meet the Beast, the castle's master. And so the father's in trouble, and the Beast demands that he sends one of his daughters in his place, and that's where Belle ends up meeting the Beast to go, and she wants to save her father. So, I'm going to go more in depth and explain what I mean by this allegory, but just to kind of get us thinking differently, we have the Belle and we have Beast. They're very different, very opposite worldviews, but by working together, they are able to, in the end, do a lot of good. And what with developing respect, friendship, helping others. So this is kind of, no copyright intended, this is ChatGPT created, but this is kind of Dr. Bell and her scientists in her lab. So that's the visual we're going to use, and then this is our biotech Beast. And then some people think of biotech as that, but I'm hoping by the end of the talk you'll think of it more as the friendly biotech. So we have Dr. Bell as our metaphor for the ivory tower. And so, we think of academia as brimming with new ideas, academic interests, maybe sub-specialized with often a narrow focus. One of the great benefits of academics is that they do have this firsthand experience with patients as treating physicians. And one of the things I realized in my position as I'm working at Biogen is that is so valuable. Like, even being a fellow and not being someone who's had decades of experience with patients, I still bring a lot of value and a lot of things that they don't realize that patients complain about. One of the things that I really try to advocate for my patients is the terrible fatigue that MS patients face, and how they'll spend half of their visit talking about their fatigue, and yet we don't hear about any drugs coming out targeting fatigue or targeting these symptoms in MS, which really does impact a lot of patients' lives, or the cognitive impact that MS patients have. Another benefit that academia brings is by collecting longitudinal patient data. That is a gold mine for understanding the disease. And diseases, for example, like multiple sclerosis, have changed so much over the years that even if someone in industry understood MS at that point, understanding what MS represents today is very different. So being able to bring that fresh and current perspective is so valuable. And being able to understand what biomarkers are really key, and how can we look at things differently and more accurately. One of the things that in academia, we focus on single center studies oftentimes, or case series. So that's one aspect. And then, a lot of times our focus is on basic research or exploratory data, focused on individual patients, like I said. But I would say, if I had to sum up one of the misperceptions of academia, it's oftentimes we seem kind of lost in our own world. Like, so really I want to emphasize to you, how do we translate, the benefits of academia to industry? Because, I think there is this tendency that we kind of self-isolate and silo ourselves, and when we could really catapult our ideas into more amazing treatments. So then, on the flip side, we have the Beast as the metaphor for biotech power. So one thing that was very emphasized to me as I went through all these clinical trial meetings, everything is very tried and true in terms of protocols. So how do you design the randomized trial, and they're really focused on global markets, which is a really interesting aspect too, because when you're thinking about a drug, you have to think about so many different aspects, like how do you manufacture it, how's the safety, how's regulation, and not just in the US, but in Europe and Japan, and they're all very different. So I really like thinking about things in a multidimensional way. On the flip side, they oftentimes, like I said, don't have a lot of relevant patient experience, or if they do have any patient experience, it's not in the patient population that they're actually trying to develop a drug. Like one thing I saw a lot is that, they're trying, people who are working in a division for multiple sclerosis, for example, their experience is coming from Alzheimer's trials, which I kept on emphasizing, MS patients are very different from Alzheimer's patients. The way you recruit, the way you do all sorts of things is going to be very different. So that was something that was surprising to me because, again, just underscoring how important it is for academia to be involved so that we're designing the right drugs for our patients. They're focused on FDA-approved primary and secondary endpoints and biomarkers, so not a lot of exploratory endpoints. What's really impressive is the ability to conduct a lot of these multi-center clinical trials in multiple countries. We're talking like 70 sites in 30 countries. Like that's really impressive to me, and it's something we rely on industry to carry out. And they think about treating patients on a population scale, which I think is also really exciting. We all really value the one-to-one patient experience, but if you're thinking about making an impact in medicine, that is a great way to feel like you're making an impact on a global scale. But if I had to sum up some of the misperceptions, I would say, like some people think, industry, they only care about money, which is like, I don't think that's like a very helpful way to dismiss industry, because you can care about money, but you can also care about making a really great drug, So oftentimes, if you make a really great drug that helps a lot of patients, that does end up making a lot of money. So I think that, yes, industry has a special duty to their investors and stockholders, but let's not dismiss industry just because there is that financial connection. So I made this table kind of summarizing the differences between academia and industry, and I'm just gonna go again, one first focusing on academia. So I think this really kind of crystallizes some of my takeaways. So again, research priorities often focus on interests of the PI, the scientist, the clinician, focus on discovery, obviously need for publications and new ideas, led by PI, and timelines are often more flexible. Traditional funding mechanisms have been NIH, NSF, foundational funding, and metrics of success more in terms of academic recognition, citations. In terms of intellectual property, oftentimes open access is encouraged, and collaboration models focused on mentorship is really unique to academia. One thing you will not get in industry is really this like mentoring of students or long-term care of patients. So I think that's important to highlight. So with industry, the research priorities obviously are product-driven, focus on practical applications, market impact, return on investment. The project structure is actually very goal-oriented, which I thought was really interesting to see. There's very explicit milestones and deliverables and timelines, often quarterly, tied to earnings reports. The funding mechanisms, there's internal research and development budget. One thing that was really eye-opening to me, I always thought in industry, when you're working on a project, you don't have to worry about funding, but that's actually not the case, because at any point your project could get cut. And even though you've spent months and months of work, and even though you've had some degree of success, if the leadership doesn't think it's a priority anymore, your project that you've been working on for years could end. So they actually have like a structure called governance, where they have to go and basically defend further company support, which is reminding me so much about how in academia we're always applying for grants. So that actually was a source of stress within the company that I saw. So I think that's important to highlight. Metrics of success, again, financial return, market approval, customer adoption. IP is intellectual property is really important. So sometimes publications will be delayed, or if a drug is undergoing regulation, that plays a role in terms of the timing of publications. And collaboration models, again, you're not going to have the same kind of mentoring of students that you would have in academia. So I just want to give a few resources for if anyone listening is interested in exploring industry more. So I am a big fan of podcasts. I think that they're a great way to keep up with an ever-changing field like biotech. So as I was learning about biotech, I started really diving into these podcasts, and these are three I really recommend. So Business of Biotech, like it says, is really focused on the actual roles. So what is a chief financial officer? What is a chief executive officer? So that was really interesting to learn more about that. Then there's Biotech Hangout, which is a podcast that is made by a lot of the leaders in the field, talking about one or two specific issues. And then probably my favorite is this last one, the Read Out Loud. So I didn't realize, but STAT is actually this really amazing journalist resource focused specifically on biotech, and it's actually based in Boston, and they do amazing podcasts every Thursday about the latest clinical trial readouts, and it's actually really funny. The journalists are really personable, so this is a great way to learn about like cutting edge phase 3 results. Some other things that I found out, there's something in Cambridge, actually around Kendall Square, called Venture Cafe, and this is actually a networking event every Thursday where you can meet people, and they have free beer every week, and it's great talks. So if you feel adventurous, you can actually start to meet some more people. There's something I found out called the Harvard Innovation Labs, which hosts a lot of competitions. So that was exciting. I went last year to hear some pitches. You can always reach out to the Office for Interactions with Industry at MGB. And then a few other ways. Like I said, you don't have to make the jump into industry to start to collaborate. You can do sponsored research agreements where you kind of conduct some of the research that's sponsored by industry in your lab. You can be part of scientific advisory boards, and this literally just involves you contributing your academic insights. This was very educational and fun to attend. Basically, they would just invite all these world experts virtually, and it would just be a half a day of going through different clinical trial designs and endpoints, and basically picking their brains about what do you think about this, what do you think about these targets, and that was just amazingly educational. And then one of the ones that probably people are most aware of is being a PI in a clinical trial site, and this is really how we have come to develop all these treatments for MS. So that is a huge part of how you can contribute as well. So some take-home points: really think about your interests and how you can best support them, support your patients and your research. Think about, are you more of a Dr. Bell or a biotech beast? Think about your blind spots, so you don't know what you don't know, and take the time to explore and be curious. And one thing that really I learned a lot is that you can stay in academia but still make important contributions and essential contributions to industry, especially in this ever-changing world. I think that's important to consider. And always explore your options, expand your network, don't be siloed within academia. There's so much that is here in Boston to take advantage of. And with that, I just want to say a few words of thanks. I really love this fellowship program. It's a really important opportunity for people starting out in their careers. Again, want to thank Dr. Cole and Dr. Ann Young, who's pictured here, the namesake of the fellowship. Dennis and Jorge were amazing support to me going through the program, the former Ann Young Fellows. And, it's just amazing as I'm finishing up my formal training to think about everyone who supported me throughout my development. And yeah, thank you all. I hope this has sparked some ideas and some food for thought, and always reach out if you would like to chat more. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. So we're going to have just a few minutes for questions and answers from both speakers. Nara, if you want to come up. I'll start off with a question for you, Roman. You showed us the very convincing slide of the onset of symptoms and the correlation with the emergence of immunological responses, but you didn't show us causality. How do you know the immune responses that you're seeing are causal and not reactive?
Well, there's only really one way to stop the inflammation, and if it affects the progression. And so, introducing a drug, certainly, we cannot prove causation without intervention. And so, right now, it certainly could be. And I should say this is that I understand Alzheimer's disease, a syndrome with multiple contributing etiologies, and the primary driver of the symptoms may be just aging, but there may be different things that are contributing to the tau accumulation, including inflammation.
So I just wanted to ask you, have they looked at very elderly adults without dementia, and have they used that as a control, or can you kind of show that you're not seeing that, to tease apart the aging and the?
Yeah, there's great new studies. The centenarian study that's based out of Amsterdam. They're looking at participants basically that have made it to 115 years of age with minimal cognitive symptoms. And I'd say there's a lot of work, but all of the postmortem analysis that I've shown, they usually they control for age and all the different factors.
Open for other questions. I don't know if we can get questions through the Zoom here. I'll ask you a quick question, Nara. So Roman is going to work at a pharmaceutical company. You're going to the BI to be a practicing neurologist. How do you visualize this experience influencing your work as a clinician?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I kind of highlighted throughout my talk that the collaboration with industry is very important, and so clinical trials is definitely going to be one aspect, but also advisory boards, so trying to shape kind of how industry is thinking about MS, progressive MS, and then also trying to advocate for patients to have more symptomatic treatments. Like I mentioned, the fatigue, the cognitive impairment, and trying to kind of use my experience with patients firsthand to discuss that with industry. Yeah.
Questions from the?
Yeah, Dr. Baxi, thank you.
Yeah, Both excellent talks. I really enjoyed that. And I like the idea of collaborations and fellowships where you can cross-fertilize between academia and industry. Definitely an idea whose time has come. What I'm curious about is how do you structure the intellectual property and the developments that may come from your fellowship as far as ownership of data between the two entities? How is that managed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you know more from like the Takeda or Pfizer side? I would defer to the Office of Interactions with Industry is what I think in the contract, I think it kind of falls under the sponsor, I would imagine, but yeah.
It really depends what data we're talking about. So, you know, basically I just showed you a lot of all publicly available data, but if it's specific, usually the things that are most protected by industry are targets and all of the work that goes around the targets. And so that's certainly something that will always be held close to their vest and not shared. On the other hand, you know, as mentioned, all of these companies are involved in consortia, and these consortia, usually there might be a little delay as they're presented, but all that information usually is made public as part of, and the real collaboration is usually, there's an agreement that the company gets the data, but the publications go to the academics. And so that's kind of the typical arrangement, that all the data can be presented as a whole in a publication, but the actual specific data itself will probably be maintained by the company.
Is there anything on the Zoom Q&A? No, we can see. No, there wasn't anything. All right, any other questions?
I have one
Please.
question. Nara, in your opinion, what do you think are the biggest areas of unmet need in MS that industry can help support, or partnership with industry might be the most beneficial?
Maybe you could repeat the question for the Zoom people.
Yeah, so the question is, what are areas in MS that are kind of underserved and that partnership with industry can help with? I would say, you know, again, I think it's, what has struck me as I see these patients throughout my fellowship is, you know, a lot of the disability is cognitive, and whether that's from fatigue or that's from like multitasking or memory, you know, kind of goes hand in hand with what you're discussing with Alzheimer's, but a different patient population. You know, so much of the disability that I see, you know, preventing these young people from being able to work is from these issues. And I think even just kind of helping patients through advocacy committees, like through the National MS Society, and just to raise awareness within the industry and with the general public, because I think a lot of the MS patients suffer like silently because these are disabilities that are not visible, and it's certainly something like before my fellowship I didn't appreciate, and that's why I keep on emphasizing it. And so I would kind of start there and start thinking like, what are ways? Also, you know, I will highlight that industry has played a great role in a lot of their patient support programs, so continuing those and maybe trying to develop more to help the cognitive aspects, or keeping in mind that a lot of MS patients deal with these other like invisible disabilities. So maybe there are ways that industry can help support them in that.
Is there anyone you know of who's working on drugs for fatigue specifically?
No, and I think it's really unmet need. I mean, I also know in myasthenia gravis that's a big problem, and it's different. It's a different etiology. It's a central etiology, and it's just something I never hear any drug company target. And even if it cut fatigue by half, you know, I feel like every patient would be on it because it really is debilitating. Like, they're not able to work, and they're not able to live their lives, and I can't emphasize enough, like, literally they will spend half their visit talking about their fatigue. Like, so you have to realize that that is something that just impacts them in every way. So I hope there will be, not for MS and for other neurologic conditions, because again, it's like a invisible disability. And a lot of these patients aren't going around and telling every person on the street about their fatigue, because a lot of people don't, if they don't see the disability, they don't understand it or believe it. It's a little bit different from like a physical disability, which in the beginning years of MS, that's what we all saw. But just to give you a quick example, you know, we have so many patients that they want to apply for like a disability placard for their car because they can walk a certain distance, but if they have to go too far, then their leg starts dragging or they start to feel fatigued. And it's just another example that this stigma that they have to face because it's invisible and because it's something that people don't really understand unless they're really taking care of patients.
I'll make one comment is, while I don't know the mechanism of fatigue in many of the inflammatory diseases, there is a phase 3 trial on orexin agonists at Takeda, which would be the first treatment for narcolepsy, and that readout this is coming up. But they had very good phase 2 data suggesting that they're going to be able to have an effect. So it would be interesting to understand, you know, the orexin pathways in MS, for example.
Yeah, maybe that'll be a breakthrough. We can more.
Well, great. I think we'll call it there, just a little after 1. There is some lunch out here. Sorry for the Zoom people that you can't join us. Thanks everybody for attending, and I hope you found this interesting. And again, if anyone is interested in this kind of an experience, please reach out to me, and we have some opportunities available. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.